The rain started the moment Davina stepped off the bus. It was as though the sky itself was weeping for what was about to unfold. She stood under the bus. Shelter, her suitcase scraped and worn, heart already pounding with raw expectation and dread. She had left everything she knew behind, her hometown, familiar faces, the daily rhythms of comfort, all for this new city, this new opportunity, and the promise of a fresh start from the moment the wheels of the bus came. To a halt, Davina sensed that she was no longer in the world she had once known. Her new home was a tiny apartment above a diner, crammed between two tired buildings that bore the signs of time and neglect. On her first night, the plumbing rattled, and the heat whispered a hesitant hum through the pipes. But even as the physical space felt fragile, it mirrored what she carried inside, hope-tinged. With fear, she had moved for a job, an offer she could hardly believe. But with that job came the unspoken burden of proving herself, of earning not just a wage but her place. Davina soon met Marcus, a co-worker at the company she had joined. Marcus was mid-30s, friendly in a reserved way, marked by the kind of resilience that comes from years of scraping. By his family, had immigrated years ago. He had built a life of compromises. He understood Davina's wide-eyed ambition, but also her quiet desperation. He invited her for morning coffee, pulled her aside when she looked lost in meetings, and shared advice. Out navigating the culture of the workplace, their connection grew in quiet gestures rather than grand declarations, like Marcus offering his umbrella when the rain returned, or Davina remembering to ask him how his daughter's recital went early on. Davina's challenge came in waves. The workload was intense, the environment unfamiliar. She'd stay late, determined to show she could handle everything, but exhaustion crept in. She started making mistakes, a misplaced report here, a misphrased email there. One evening she caught herself staring at the blinking cursor on her screen, the office lights long off. The silence, pressing in her mind, cried out, "Who am I working for? What am I? Doing this for the weight of being far from home, from family and friends, made every achievement feel hollow at home." The loneliness was sharp. Her phone buzzed with messages from home, friends marrying, relatives having babies, life staying the same while hers had flipped. Davina felt guilty. Why had I left them behind and embarrassed? Why do I still feel like I'm failing? The apartment walls felt like mirrors reflecting her doubts. Some nights she walked the empty streets, trying to breathe away the anxiety, the self-judgment. Then came the worst setback. A major project she was leading went off course. A key supplier pulled out at the last minute. The budget doubled, deadlines collapsed. Davina felt exposed in front of her team, her supervisor, and worst of all, herself. She replayed every decision, every moment she had doubted herself. In the conference room full of quiet faces, she heard the unspoken question in the air. Does she even know what she's doing? Marcus watched from the back of the room. After, he quietly shared, "I know you didn't plan this, but I believe you can fix it." And for the first time, Davina realized that though she felt alone, she wasn't without allies. That night, she didn't retreat to her apartment. Instead, she reached out to her team. She asked for their input, admitted where she'd gone wrong, and invited them to help steer the project back on track. It was a humbling decision, inviting vulnerability into a space where she thought she had to appear infallible. She and her team mapped out a recovery plan, renegotiate with alternative suppliers, recalibrate timelines, and rebuild trust with stakeholders. It was messy. There were late nights and tense calls. There were tears in the kitchen when the stress finally overcame her. But there were also breakthroughs. A vendor who believed in her idea, a colleague who volunteered to help beyond the call of duty, a small victory when the first milestone was met under budget. Marcus, too, had his own burdens. He had saved money for his daughter's college fund, but unexpected hospital bills drained his savings. He feared letting his daughter down, feared being the parent who couldn't deliver. Davina, although consumed by her own struggles, listened. She reminded him that being strong isn't always about never falling, it's about rising again in turn. Marcus reminded her that ambition is meaningful only when anchored in purpose. Together they found a fragile balance. She found someone who believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. He found someone who understood that asking for help didn't mean weakness. As the project approached its new deadline, Something shifted inside Davina. The exhaustion remained, but the fear receded, the loneliness still. Whispered in the quiet hours, but now she could answer with, I'm not alone. There was a scene on the final presentation day where she walked into the room. Her palms were slightly damp. She swallowed the memory of all. The missteps, the late nights, the doubts. She stood and spoke clearly. She told the story of how they had fallen off track and how the team had rallied. She acknowledged what was difficult and what they had learned. Then she delivered the result. The project came in under the recalibrated budget, and the client expressed genuine satisfaction. The applause that followed felt more than polite. It felt earned in the aftermath. Davina didn't stand atop the world. She simply walked out of the meeting room. The weight of stress lifted enough for her to breathe in the rainy city air. Her phone buzzed. A message from home. Her younger sister telling her how proud she was. Davina paused, realizing that home wasn't just a place she left behind. It was a foundation she carried within her. She had changed. But that change didn't mean losing the part. Her that cared, that loved, that remembered. In the months that followed, Davina's apartment no longer felt empty. She furnished it with small things that made her smile. A picture of her family, a plant she'd named Hope, books she returned to when the world felt too loud. She still worked late sometimes. The pressure never vanished, but the difference was clear. She now held not only ambition, but resilience. And in one quiet moment, Marcus and Davina sat in the diner downstairs after hours, sipping coffee. The rain pattered. Outside, Marcus smiled and said, "Look how far we've come." Davina looked at him and said, "Thanks for showing me I didn't have to do this on my own." Marcus nodded. "You didn't, and you didn't have to be perfect, just real." So here is the message. Growth often happens when we step into the storm willingly, knowing we may stumble. It happens when we allow others in, when we admit our flaws, when we turn setbacks into stepping stones. If you're feeling lost, overwhelmed, like you left everything for something uncertain, remember Davina's story. You may feel the weight of loneliness, the sting of failure, the fear of being found out, but those things don't define you. What defines you is standing up anyway, opening your hand for help, rebuilding with truth and courage. In the end, reaching for new horizons isn't just about changing your location or your job. It's about reshaping the relationship you have with yourself and others. So step into your moment. It might rain, it might thunder, but those drops, those storms, they refresh something inside. They remind you that you're alive, you're capable, and your story isn't over yet.